American voters have spoken. This Week Live starts right now.
From ABC News, it's This Week Live. Here now, Jonathan Karl.
Welcome to This Week Live, our look at the week in politics here on ABC News Live. I'm Jonathan Karl. Thank you for streaming with us. While there are still some votes to be counted out west, the election is over and a new countdown has begun. It is now 73 days until Donald Trump will be sworn in as the 47th president of the United States. We're going to check in with Rachel Scott in Palm Beach shortly about what the president-elect is up to and how Elon Musk ended up joining his call with Ukrainian President Zelensky. We'll also talk to Catherine Falders, who is tracking the ins and outs of the Trump transition. As of this moment, just one battleground state remains to be called, and a win there in Arizona, where Trump is currently leading, would give him a clean sweep of the battleground states and would bring his electoral vote count to 312. That's more than he had in 2016, more than Joe Biden had in 2020. And Trump currently holds a 4.3 million vote lead nationally, on track to be the first Republican to win the popular vote in 2 decades. There's no question that Donald Trump not only won, he can claim a mandate. And Republicans are barreling towards control of the White House and all of Congress, with the GOP now holding at least 52 seats in the Senate, with the potential to pick up 1, maybe more, in the coming days as the final votes are counted in 3 competitive Senate races: Pennsylvania, Nevada, and Arizona. The party has already won 212 seats in the House and needs just 6 more out of 19 yet to be called to win a government trifecta for at least the first 2 years of Trump's second term. As he declared victory early Wednesday, Trump said, quote, "This will truly be a golden age of America." And he said, "We're going to help our country heal." All that sounded, to me at least, a stark contrast to his talk of retribution that we often heard during the campaign. One of the people who has spent time with Trump in Mar-a-Lago after his victory is his one-time opponent for the Republican nomination, Vivek Ramaswamy. Ramaswamy will join me here in New York on Sunday for an exclusive interview on This Week. We wanted to get his perspective on the emerging second Trump administration, but we wanted to talk to him for another reason. Something caught our attention. Comments that Ramaswamy made the day after Trump's victory. Take a listen to just a little bit of what he had to say.
I think that talking about the radical Biden agenda or the Harris failures, I guess I would call on our fellow Republicans to say we're done with that. Not because we want to play nice or sweep it under the rug, but because we have more important work to do. I think if those on our side are willing to say we're willing to put the grievances of yesterday behind because we won, and we won decisively, and we're going to marshal that to not just run from something, but run to something, enter that golden age with the vision of what's possible in the United States of America, I can equally ask of our friends on the left to say, give us a chance to prove what's possible. This isn't the Republican Party of yesterday. America First includes all Americans, as it should.
Interesting comments. Actually, the whole speech was quite interesting, and they seemed quite conciliatory. On one hand, that might be expected. After all, Donald Trump won a commanding victory. As I called it on election night, it is the greatest comeback in the history of American politics. Why, given that, would he need to be consumed with attacking his already vanquished political enemies? But then again, retribution was a central theme in Trump's campaign from the very beginning. And some of those who are very close to the former president, and future president now, are expecting retribution to be a big part of the Trump agenda going forward. Take, for example, Mike Davis. He is a conservative lawyer, a former clerk for Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch, and somebody who Donald Trump Jr. has mentioned as a possible Trump attorney general. Now, Davis recently said he won't be serving in the administration, but he isn't hiding his advice to Donald Trump. Just last night on X, he posted this. Trump's opponents attempted to bankrupt him for non-fraud and imprison him for life for non-crimes and take him off the ballot and take off his head. And now they want unity? F them. Let's unify them in prison. And in another X post, Davis said this about how Trump should handle his political opponents. Here's my current mood. I want to drag their dead political bodies through the streets, burn them and throw them off the wall. in parentheses, legally, politically, and financially, of course. So what's it going to be? Is it a time for the country to heal, or is it a time for Trump to root out and destroy his political opponents? Let's get the latest from Mar-a-Lago with my colleague, Rachel Scott in Palm Beach. Rachel, first of all, tremendous work covering this election from the start. I wanted to get your take on this extraordinary development. The president, future president, had a conversation with Zelensky, one of the most important conversations on the foreign leader calls he's having, and Elon Musk joined?
Yeah, this is one of Donald Trump, President-elect Trump's most powerful supporters, the richest man in the world, Elon Musk. And this is reporting from myself, our Catherine Falders, and Will Staken. We talked to our sources, and we learned that Elon Musk was on this call with Ukrainian President Zelensky and President-elect Donald Trump. This, of course, is one of the very first calls that we are told that President-elect Trump has had with a foreign leader. I am told that the discussion started off by praising Starlink, the communication service. Zelensky was praising that Elon Musk has founded. And it just underscores, John, the immense amount of influence that Musk could possibly have as we enter a Trump administration. Of course, we have reported repeatedly about how Musk was on the ground in critical battleground states like Pennsylvania, even giving away million-dollar checks at one point to registered voters who signed his super PAC. But this takes it the next step further. Musk, who was here at Mar-a-Lago on election night and the morning after, joining a call with a foreign leader as important as President Zelensky, and also the president-elect, just underscores the significance that he could play in this next administration.
I mean, it's especially extraordinary when you consider we've already known that Trump has talked about Musk being part of his effort to have a government efficiency bureau or some such thing like that. But this is foreign policy. But let me ask you, while I've got you, Rachel, again, because you were covering this campaign thoroughly and tirelessly for nearly 2 full years. And I was with you near the end at that extraordinary rally at Madison Square Garden. And I know that as I was watching the rally there, I was thinking he had motivated his base, but I thought it was going to alienate other voters. I know a lot of other Trump advisors who I spoke to and friends and supporters had the same fear. What do you think happened there? Did that rally, I mean, didn't seem to have much of an effect, or did it actually help him?
Yeah, it didn't seem to have very much of an effect at all. You know, look, I've been talking to Trump advisors and allies within that world, as I know that you have, John. And in my reporting, talking to them about that Madison Square Garden rally and those comments made by that speaker who compared Puerto Rico to an island of garbage, Democrats pounced on that. Vice President Kamala Harris seized on it. She went after President-elect Donald Trump on that very issue. And as the results were coming in, we saw that President-elect Trump was only strengthening his support with Latino voters across the country. And I remember just in the days after those comments were made, he traveled to Pennsylvania. He went to Reading, which is 72% Hispanic. He visited Puerto Rican communities. He was pitching them that he was going to be the person that could come in and solve the economic issues in this country. People are still feeling the pinch. And despite the Biden administration and Vice President Kamala Harris really trying to sell people on the fact that their economic policies were working, that isn't the reality that I think many people in this country are feeling. And particularly in Reading, Pennsylvania, and along that Latino belt is a place where I spent a lot of time talking to voters, talking to people that were showing up to some of these rallies as well. And for them, it really was all about their reality, how they were feeling, the economic issues that were in front of them. And so even though they felt like Vice President Kamala Harris was seizing on these attacks by a speaker invited to that Trump rally, they felt like President-elect Trump was actually laying out a vision for how to address it. And in the end, just judging from what ended up happening on election night, that seems to be what ultimately carried him across the finish line, especially with Latino voters. They just felt like the president-elect laid out a better plan and was better representative of where the country needed to be headed.
The economic reality ultimately mattered more than the insults that were being hurled by a comedian at Madison Square Garden. Hey, Rachel, thank you very much. Great to talk to you. We'll see you when you get back to town. Appreciate it very much. Let's go just across the way there to Catherine Falders, who is also outside Mar-a-Lago with the latest on the transition. Catherine, you've been tracking all the ins and outs of this. Give me a sense. We have the president-elect has named his chief of staff, Susie Wiles, not really a surprise, ran the campaign. What's the process now? When do you expect we're going to see more appointments made of, senior positions in his White House?
Yeah, so Susie was not surprising because she's been around for a while, and also because he wants his chief of staff involved in the decision-making, who he picks for these top positions. So I'm told by sources today, John, that Trump is at Mar-a-Lago. He's huddling with his team, and he is looking at some of these presentations for these top positions, who he will fill his cabinet with. And the focus, at least so far, as you know, you've reported, has been on Attorney General, but also on a lot of these national security decisions. Now, to put this in perspective, our colleague John Parkinson actually reminded me that last time around in the administration, the first cabinet position that he named, that Trump named publicly, was his Attorney General. Now, that was Jeff Sessions at the time. He did that mid-November. Now, he didn't name a White House counsel until the end of November. Typically, those are the positions that we'll see. So if that tracks at all, and from our reporting and what we're hearing, his focus, he wants to have his top lawyer in place. He wants to have his national security advisor, and, of course, all of those law enforcement positions that he's been talking about. There's a lot of jockeying going on for these jobs. The vetting is pretty much almost done by the vetting team. So it's just a matter of presenting these names to him, and he will pick them in conjunction, of course, with Susie Wiles, who will have a big role in who he picks.
And let me ask you a tough question, because I don't know if there's an answer that's knowable, but who's really running the transition? He's obviously appointed Linda McMahon and Howard Lutnick a while ago to run his transition, but I mean, I'm hearing all kinds of back and forth and competing, power centers, making the case. What is happening? Who's in charge?
Yeah, look, on paper, we see that Howard Lutnick, a billionaire, is the CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald, a pretty new friend to Trump. And then Linda McMahon, of course, she's was in his administration last time. The two of them are running it, essentially. However, as you know, there are lots of competing forces here. Howard Lutnick, we're told, is also lobbying for a job in the administration. He wants to be the Treasury Secretary, but also wants to run the transition team. So sure, yeah, there are a lot of meetings about personnel, about vetting, but the reality is, and there's all sorts of competing factions here. There's people who believe they're running the legal side of it. Boris Epstein, Trump's top legal advisor, is essentially giving input for all of the law enforcement jobs. That input is obviously different than what some people who are supposed to be running the transition think, and you know this because you report on it. He's also calling all sorts of people who he wants to have a say in all of this, right? And others who he says, you're running this, you're in charge. So it's not totally clear, but the reality is they're all over there. They're all talking in some way, but who is making the decisions? Look, I don't know. But Susie, given that she's the chief of staff, is de facto now the head of it.
Now the head of the transition. Well, one thing that I've learned covering Trump over the years is he takes advice from just about everybody and then does exactly what he wants to do. So thank you very much. Catherine Falders in Palm Beach. We'll talk to you again very soon. Joining me now is former President, let me start all this all over. Joining me now is Reince Priebus. We know who Reince Priebus is because he used to be the chief of staff. He was the first chief of staff. He was at the center of the last Trump transition into the White House. Reince, thank you for joining us.
Hey, happy to be on. Yeah, you're right. President Trump doesn't listen to one person. He listens to a chorus. That's how I describe it. So he will listen to the chorus and he'll make a decision.
What is your sense of how this process? And first of all, I assume you've been in touch with the former president and the people around him. How is this process unfolding?
Well, I think it's actually going pretty well. I mean, especially compared to 2016. I mean, we walked in and didn't really have our transition. We know what happened there. And so we kind of started brand new on day one and just started interviewing people and started with the cabinet positions, moving into the other smaller agencies, and then moving into the presidential appointments and so on and so forth. So I just think, number one, you get your chief set. I think it's great that Susie was picked. I was supportive of that pick. I think she's going to do a great job. I don't think she's going to have, she's not going to share power with someone else, in the case of, what I dealt with. And I don't think she's going to have a lot of people around her with huge titles and no job either. I think the people going in are going to have specific jobs to do. and the chief is going to be the chief.
Yeah.
The way it should be.
Yeah, let's remember, when you came in, you were the chief of staff, but the announcement also included Steve Bannon as the chief strategist and the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, as, what was his title again? The chief something else?
Senior advisor.
Senior advisor. It was like a three-headed leadership. But you know how hard it is to be Donald Trump's chief of staff. I mean, and he had 4 of them. He had 4.
Well, I mean, I was technically chief of staff. I mean, I take responsibility. I mean, I knew I agreed to what I walked into. So I don't begrudge anyone for it. I actually thought, certainly as we went going in the week 3 or month 3, 4, 5, I felt like we were starting to get on a roll. So it is what it is. I just feel like Susie's got a really good situation. And on top of it, President Trump understands the White House. I mean, he's not intimidated by it. It's not mysterious. He knows it. And that takes, I think, a lot of the trepidation out, makes things a lot smoother. And he's got a mandate. I mean, he's got something. We were still counting votes, if you remember, in Minnesota, in Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. We were still getting updates. We had people that were still working in those states in 2016. He's got a clear mandate. But he won the popular vote. He crushed his opponent. He crushed them in New Jersey, New York, Minnesota, all over the country. So this is a lot different. Donald Trump is going to be able to do.
Well, wait a minute. I mean, he didn't crush his opponent in New Jersey. He lost New Jersey. But yeah, commanding victory. But he didn't crush him in New Jersey. But let me just ask you, because you have the experience being in there as chief of staff, and you know how difficult it is, and you know that he went through 4 chiefs. You know, you were gone by the end of the summer. What is your advice to her about how to be a successful chief of staff to Donald Trump?
Well, I mean, I think, number one, you have to pick the staff along with the president. But I think and I think it's different. I think President Trump is going to let Susie actually pick the big pieces of the puzzle that are going to be working in the White House. Mm-hmm. I think that's number one. I mean, she's got to pick the main pieces of the puzzle around here. I think that's important. And obviously, I think making sure that everyone's got a job to do that's in the White House. It can't just be, I'm going to be in charge of just, thinking about things and then, influencing the president. That can't be the job. There has to actually be a portfolio of work. So I think those are the 2 things for sure. And I think I think that's going to happen. I really think. I think that in our case in the beginning, that was just a learning curve, and also I think just trying to make a lot of people happy by putting in different people in different places. And sometimes when you try to make too many people happy in the beginning, it just doesn't work. And so I think that's the main thing, Jonathan.
Hey, we're just about to get your reaction first to what Donald Trump had to say about Susie on election night and how she reacted. Take a listen to this.
Let me also express my tremendous appreciation for Susie and Chris, the job you did. Susie, come here. Come here, Susie. Chris, come here, Chris. Susie likes to stay sort of in the back, let me tell you. The Ice Maiden, we call her the Ice Maiden.
Now the thing I noticed is he asked her to come speak a couple times there, and she absolutely refused to step up to that lectern and to say anything into that microphone. Not a lot of people in Trump world, first of all, say no, but.
Well, listen. I know. First of all, they did a great job. I mean, how can anyone not say that? Number one. Number two, I know that feeling. Of being called up on election night. I was the one person the president called up in 2016. And that moment is so wild because the whole world is watching. Yeah. You know the world is stunned. And the president just called you to speak. Yeah. The fear, the vindication, the thankfulness, everything rushing through your head. I didn't say much either. I just said, ladies and gentlemen, the next president of the United States, Donald Trump, thank God.
Yeah, that's probably the way to handle it. You certainly don't want to say too much. All right, Reince Priebus, thank you for talking to us. I noticed you have that bass guitar back there. Next time we'll get you to play a little bit for us. Thank you very much.
You bet.
All right, still ahead. Here on This Week Live, how Trump's sweeping election could wipe away the legal challenges, most likely will wipe away the legal challenges he's facing. We're back in a moment. All right, so what does Trump's victory mean for all of those legal cases he was facing? There was supposed to be a sentencing coming up in New York. In that case, there were developments today with Jack Smith and his 2 cases against Donald Trump, and of course, there's the case in Georgia. Let's find out where this all goes and what happens with the Supreme Court. We've got 2 of our best legal minds. We have former Trump Justice Department spokesperson Sarah Isgur and ABC News senior Washington reporter David Muir. So, Sarah, first of all, Jack Smith went and basically asked for all of the deadlines to be vacated in the special counsel January 6th case. The judge has gone along with that. He's clearly winding up that case. I assume he's also winding up the classified documents case. Let me ask you, because you know what special counsel investigations are all about. You were there at the Justice Department when there was one run by a guy named Robert Mueller. How does this end? Does Jack Smith write a final report? Is that final report released, like right before Trump is sworn in? What happens?
So in the Mueller investigation, of course, the only thing they could do was issue a report because, of course, the Department of Justice is part of the executive branch. The Attorney General reports to the president. The Attorney General can't indict his boss. Here, of course, they already filed the indictment, so we have really all of the information. Could he file a report? Absolutely. But that report, I think, is most likely to say, we filed an indictment, it's attached, and we dismissed the case based on DOJ policy.
So, so it'll be a short and sweet. The thing's over. It won't be a recounting of what they found and all, because that could be a quite damning final report, just like Mueller's final report, was quite damning. You think it's just simply forget about it? It's over?
That's what the indictments were for. I mean, Jack Smith filed speaking indictments, meaning he laid out not just the evidence, but also the narrative and the story behind it. I don't see what more a report could do at this point. I think it would hurt the Department of Justice, make it look more politicized than it needs to. I think the best thing Jack Smith can do right now, put a bow on it, it's done.
And Devin, what is your sense of what happens in New York? I mean, there's supposed to be a sentencing in the hush money case. I mean, he's been not just indicted, he was convicted. Sentencing was put off till after the election. It's New York. The Justice Department has nothing to do with this. It's a New York case. What happens?
Yeah, and how does that compute with the Supreme Court's immunity decision? I mean, it's a state law case, obviously, but there's been a lot of talk about will there be any bearing now that Trump is going to be back into office. And I got to say, John, the Supreme Court really laid the groundwork for this moment. I remember when they slow-walked this case, taking it up. It took them months to even consider taking it. They issued a decision in July, clearly boxing out any trial, even to get underway in this case. And remember, the decision they ultimately gave actually would have allowed a case to go forward. Had Biden won this election, perhaps he would have seen something. The court said Jack Smith can actually bring some charges here, potentially involving private conduct. So the court unquestionably played a role in getting us to this point, too. And it depends upon which political lens you're looking through, whether that was deliberate or not.
But Sarah, the immunity would be apply to the federal cases, which are going to go away. Jack Smith's made that clear. But what does it mean in New York? I mean, can a New York district attorney or attorney general, we also have a civil case, continue to sentence a sitting president?
So let me break this apart for a second.
I mean, there's potential jail term here. I mean, can you put it? Just help me understand how does it do anything but go away?
So on the immunity decision, that case was moving forward with the same number of charges and the same statutory charges. I think Devin's exactly right. If Biden had been elected, that would have moved forward without issue, because so much of what he was charged with was personal, not official conduct as president, but as a candidate. On the state cases, I talked about how the Department of Justice can't bring charges against their own boss because of those separation of powers issues within a single branch. But actually, we have federalism issues. A state also can't bring criminal charges or criminal process against the president because that would distract from his ability to fulfill his oath of office to take care that the laws be faithfully executed. So the Georgia case, for instance, will have to be put on hold until he leaves office. In the New York sentencing case, because he's already been convicted, in theory, they could sentence him and then put that sentence on hold for 4 years. But I think the fact that Judge Marchand delayed sentencing until after the election means that he will probably just freeze this process, the appeals that are going on, until after the election. Now, the civil cases are different. The Supreme Court has said during Bill Clinton's presidency, civil cases don't actually distract a sitting president. So while the New York Attorney General's case and the Carroll the sexual abuse case are both on appeal with huge judgments against Trump. Jean Carroll, thank you. Those will move forward while he is president.
Wow. All right. So, while I've got the two of you here, you're both my Supreme Court experts. So first, I got to ask you, Devin, there's this talk, some Democrats, some on the left, saying that Sonia Sotomayor, who's 70 years old, has had some health challenges, that, that there should be pressure on her to resign so that Joe Biden, on the way out the door, could nominate somebody to replace her, and the Democratic Senate, which is also on the way out the door, could quickly, in a lame duck session, confirm a new Supreme Court justice. This seems a little bit like fantasy to me, but what are you hearing?
Yeah, it does to me too, John. I mean, but the specter of Ruth Bader Ginsburg lives on. I mean, she died, remember, at the tail end of Trump's first term. I mean,
before the election, though. Before the election.
Before the election. That is absolutely right. But they are feeling it here. I mean, Sotomayor is well below the average age of retirement for Supreme Court justices. She's 70 years old, in good health. She's vigorous. I've seen her up close. By all accounts, she's in good shape. But who knows what could happen? I mean, that was the thing with Ginsburg. 75 is the average age. Everybody I've talked to, John, close to Sotomayor, says there is no indication she's ready to leave, she wants to leave, or that she would leave. I mean, what would it look like if she bowed out under all this pressure at this moment in time? And that's not even talking about the politics and the logistics, which you alluded to. I mean, can the Senate even do that in this short amount of time?
Razor-thin
it's long odds. That's right.
I mean, I'd also love to see that conversation, because the suggestion is that Biden should pressure her to drop out. So Biden would say, look, I think you're a little too old, for a job like this. Okay, before we go, Sarah, he's going to be president again. He's got a 4-year term. He's got certainly an opportunity, it seems plausible, to appoint maybe 1, 2, maybe 3 Supreme Court justices. Could we see a situation where 2/3 of this court is a Trump court?
Well, I think the likelihood would be that Justice Alito retires, potentially Justice Thomas as well, and that would be 5 nominations for this president. We haven't seen that since Eisenhower. Of course, FDR before him had 8 of the 9 justices. Washington had 100%.
Washington's predecessor didn't do much at all. I mean, that's the thing.
Those articles of Confederation were a bummer. But, to the Sonia Sotomayor point as well, another history lesson. This is what Earl Warren tried to do in 1968 as LBJ was clearly leaving office. He retired in the hopes that LBJ would pick his predecessor. LBJ nominated Abe Fortas. That nomination ran into trouble. LBJ ran out of time, and Nixon got to replace Warren after all.
I always like a good history lesson on This Week Live. Sarah Isgur, Devin Dwyer, thank you very much, both of you, for being here. Still ahead on This Week Live, I sit down with radio host Charlamagne the God for the fallout, talk about the fallout for Democrats and Kamala Harris after the crushing election loss on Tuesday. We are back in a moment. We're We're back with more This Week Live. One of the most influential and most listened to voices on the airwaves, Charlamagne the God, was an outspoken supporter of Vice President Kamala Harris after she replaced Joe Biden as the Democratic presidential nominee. I have spoken with him several times throughout this campaign as the race unfolded, when Biden was the candidate and after Harris took over. This week, I returned to his New York studio to get his reaction to Trump's victory and what it means for the country. It was a fascinating conversation. Here is just one part of it. Have you talked to her since the loss?
No, I haven't, but I can't wait to.
What are you going to tell her?
I'm going to tell her I love her, I value her, I appreciate her, and, you know, whatever she plans to do moving forward, I'm going to always support her, and I'm going to say what I've, been saying on the radio and on my podcast, that she has nothing to be ashamed about. She ran a great campaign and only had 100 days to do it. Nobody thought she could even do what it is that she did. Like, the first day getting all the delegates in line, raising the money that she raised, digging the campaign out of a hole to where they were neck and neck on election day. And she inspired a lot of people. Like, I got 4 daughters, and my 9-year-old and my 6-year-old, when I'm watching, This Week ABC on Sunday morning, or I'm watching CNN or Fox or MSNBC, they're coming in and they're asking me questions about Vice President Kamala Harris. And they were, are you going to vote for the Vice President, Daddy? Yes, I'm voting for the Vice President. And when she lost, they were upset that she was lost. So, she did inspire a lot of people, and it was a historic campaign. But to me, it's about forward motion at this moment in time. Like, we are still Americans at the end of the day, and that's what we need to be talking about right now. Unity, consciousness. We've been divided for so long, and it's just like, regardless of what, Donald Trump and his administration going there and doing the White House, we on the ground, we have to be civil with each other.
What do you make of the demographics here? I mean, Trump got 1 out of every 3 voters of color.
No.
Yeah.
1 out of
33%.
No. Really?
Yeah.
When you say color, you mean like black, brown, everything. Oh, well, I think that, people have different issues that they care about, and I think that there's nobody out there that's a single-issue voter. I think some of this is a backlash to race and gender and identity politics, but, man, most people, they just care about keeping food on their table and keeping a roof over their head. And I think sometimes people forget about that. I think that they forget about, the working class. And for whatever reason, Donald Trump speaks to the grievances of the working class in a real way. And I keep telling folks, people will forget what you did, they'll forget what you said, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And when you go back to 2020, even though it was a pandemic and it was COVID, yeah, people don't care. All they know is they got stimulus checks with his name on it, and that's what they remember. And so people think about that. When you have conversations with folks, they'd be like, yo, I remember how 2020 felt. And they think that they're going to feel that, in this next term.
Let me ask you, Congressman Richie Torres of New York, he had this to say about what went wrong. He said, Donald Trump has no greater friend than the far left, which has managed to alienate historic numbers of Latinos, blacks, Asians, and Jews from the Democratic Party with absurdities like defund the police or from the river to the sea or Latinx. There is more to lose than there is to gain politically from pandering to the far left that is more representative of Twitter, Twitch, or TikTok than the real world. You agree with that? I think there's something to that?
I think what he's talking about is what I always speak to, which is messaging. I think that, when it comes to slogans like defund the police, when you have the right who can take that slogan and turn it into something it's not, and then people on the left aren't able to explain it in a way that folks will understand, then, they're able to weaponize those things against you, So yeah, there's something to that. I just think it's literally all about messaging. Like when you talk about the Biden-Harris campaign and what they did over the last 4 years, you can point to a lot of different things that they did right in the White House, but they're just not able to message it. I mean, for whatever reason, Republicans, especially this iteration of Republicans, are just better at messaging than Democrats.
So you had Laura Trump on the show the weeks before the election.
After Trump won, I sent her a message and told her, hey, congratulations. And I said to her, I hope that this administration is going to be an administration for all Americans. And she said, thank you. I promise, in capital letters, that it will be. Listen, man, I think that we've seen enough of Donald Trump to know that may not be the case. But like I said, I just have to have a sense of optimism because he still is the president of the United States of America. And I just want us, like I said, as a people moving forward, we got to start building more community amongst each other. And, you know, we just got to hope for the best. Like, I'm not wishing for America to fail. Why would I want that?
Our thanks to Charlamagne. Like I said, a fascinating conversation. There's much more of it that you will see as my full conversation airs Sunday morning on This Week. Coming up, our team breaks down an historic week in politics and what to expect in the Trump transition. Also, what are the Democrats going to do? We'll be right back. After this historic week, let's bring in our ABC News political team. ABC News Washington Bureau Chief and Political Director Rick Klein, ABC News White House Correspondent Mary Alice Parks, and National Review Editor and ABC News contributor Ramesh Ponnuru. So I want to ask you guys about something that just kind of crossed the transom here a short while ago. It's an interview that Nancy Pelosi just gave with the Daily, the New York Times podcast. And Rick, I'm gonna come to you on this, but let me read these quotes from Nancy Pelosi about Joe Biden and about what went down. She told the Times that she believed it was that Joe Biden should have gotten out earlier, and that it was implicitly understood that there should have been some kind of a process, like a mini primary. So here's the quote. Had the president gotten out sooner, there may have been other candidates in the race. The anticipation was that if the president were to step aside, there would be an open primary. And she goes on, and as I say, Kamala may have, I think she would have done well and had been stronger going forward, but we don't know that. That didn't happen. We live with what happened, and that's because the president endorsed Kamala Harris immediately, and that made it almost impossible to have a primary at that time. If it had been earlier, she says it could have been differently. So what I see there is not one, but two strong criticisms of Joe Biden from Nancy Pelosi. One, he should have gotten out earlier, and two, she seems to be suggesting he shouldn't have stepped on the process by endorsing Kamala Harris. He should have allowed an open competition to go forward. What do you make of that, Rick?
Well, it adds some really interesting texture to what we knew was going on during that period. But Nancy Pelosi, to be clear, was not saying this in real time. She interacted with President Biden regularly, even before the CNN debate back in June, and never raised any concerns about his condition. And then after the debate, at least publicly, we knew what was going on privately, but publicly maintained that he was the pick. It was far too late, regardless, for an open primary. All the delegates had been selected. What hadn't happened yet was a convention. It was always viewed, to people I talked to, as kind of a real long shot to think that you could have an open process at that late stage. And a lot of people were arguing just the opposite, that you had to deliver it for Kamala Harris. But Nancy Pelosi to come forward with this now, when she said nothing about this publicly and was very careful privately at the time, seems to me like just trying to explain the pieces of history of this and try to cast some blame for what went down when there's a lot of it to go around inside the party.
Mary Alice, you've spent a lot of time talking to Democrats in the wake of this defeat. Is the Pelosi take here the conventional wisdom, or is there? I mean, there's a bit of a bloodletting going out, it seems, among Democrats.
I mean, the first person that everyone wanted to point fingers at was President Biden. I mean, immediately. Honestly, that anxiety before even the results started coming in. People knew that he was going to take the heat if this didn't go well for Democrats, precisely because he stayed in the race too long. The feeling, like Nancy Pelosi brought up, that Democrats would have benefited from kind of some big, healthy primary, that voters don't like any choice that they feel was that they didn't get a say in, that was sort of shoved down their throats. I talked to a lot of Democrats that felt like this the second time. It's been quoted to me the second time that a woman was forced in front of voters from the Democratic Party. That's an interesting take I've heard from a lot of people on Capitol Hill. But look, Democrats are trying to sort through the rubble here. They are going to have to spend weeks and years dealing with sort of sorting through the ashes of what went wrong.
I mean, I don't understand that. How was Hillary Clinton forced on voters?
Well,
she won a
I'm
primary.
sure you also saw, right, 100%, but the feeling among the progressive wing of the party was that the party leadership, I mean, this is the conversation happening, among staff, that the party leadership sort of united to kick Bernie out, to not be fair to Bernie Sanders. I'm sure you saw that blistering statement that he put out the day after the election, too. So, look, it's not new that the progressive wing of the party is pointing fingers back at others. I mean, we've seen Democratic infighting for years, and it's going to continue going forward.
And Ramesh, what's your take of that, the Bernie Sanders take? So you had two very different takes. You had Bernie Sanders say that basically it was Democratic policies, they abandoned the middle class, the working class. And then you had Richie Torres, the congressman from New York, who said that the Democrats brought this on by pandering to the far left.
Well, not surprising that Bernie Sanders' reaction to the election is to think that the Democrats should just have been more like him. That's kind of every politician's reaction to every election defeat, and for that matter, every election victory. I think what we're seeing right now is the Democrats all kind of going through the stages of grief, all of them simultaneously. And so it's going to be a little bit of a messy process, because I think this was a shock to them, not just that Trump won, but how he won, how he's probably got a popular vote win, the victories in the Senate and the House, and the inroads among minority groups. All of this is taking a long time it's going to take a long time to process. And I don't think that there's going to be a single answer to it. I think there's probably a number of things that are at play here before the left and right of the party can make a synthesis.
And Rick, we're actually, and I'm surprised I'm not seeing you in front of a board somewhere. It seems like you've been living in front of a magic wall for a while. We're still waiting on a few races. We still don't know for sure who's going to control the House. And we have those 3 Senate races that are outstanding. Where do you think this, when the dust all settles, where's it going to settle?
Well, you always want to be the first candidate whose name is listed when you go into extended time or recounts or legal challenges. Right now, in the Senate, we've got Dave McCormick leading Bobby Casey, which would give another Senate seat to Republicans. In the House, I don't see a great path for Democrats in taking over control of the House. It seems like Republicans are going to get there. I believe they're at 212 right now, and they're marched to 218 with about 20 races outstanding. A lot of these West Coast races are going to take days, even weeks, to count. But the bottom line is the Republican majority, if there is a majority, is going to be just about as slim, if not slimmer, than it was before. Not to take away from the fact that Donald Trump will have what counts for now a huge majority in the Senate and a majority of Supreme Court justices that have given him additional powers. So he's going to come to Washington, as you know, John, with a lot more power than he had the first time, just by virtue of the votes and who those votes are. So many of these new members of Congress or people that have joined during the Trump era owe their political existences to him almost directly in the Republican side. And I think they're very much inclined to do what he wants.
And it's fascinating. This is quite a reversal from 2020, because what you're seeing is Trump running ahead of the Senate candidates and running ahead of the House. The House, like you said, might lose ground. If they hold the House, as they probably will, it's largely because of redistricting, not because they had great shakes, but it was Trump. It was Trump leading the way. Hey, we have to take a very quick break. Don't go away. We will be back in just a moment with a little bit on the Trump transition. I know these folks all have a good take on that. See you in a minute. All right, we're back This Week Live with a quick couple of minutes on the Trump transition. The big question here, I want to come to you first, Ramesh, about this, is what's it going to be about retribution? Are we all kind of looking positively towards the future? Is retribution a thing of the past? Or is what we're hearing out of people like Mike Davis, which I read some of his statements he's been making on Twitter about basically wanting to round up and put in prison all of those that went after Donald Trump. What is the take? Which direction is this going?
I think that that is one of many questions that are still to be determined. I don't think that we should think about this in terms of Trump having a master plan and a bunch of people who are willing to implement, planks A, B, and C in a row. I think it's going to depend on how he feels. And we haven't had, he said a lot of things he hasn't followed through on before.
And Rick, he's going to, in terms of naming his cabinet, who he's going to put as attorney general, is it going to be the kind of attorney general, and by the way, deputy attorney general, that will go after, use the powers of the Department of Justice to go after his political opponents? Confirmation is going to be an easier process now that he has at least 52 votes in the Senate. I mean, he's going to have wide latitude, isn't he?
Yeah, it's a different landscape entirely, and I think the difference in our worlds today of between 51, 52, and 53 tells you everything you need to know about the lack of moderates right now. A Senate that won't have Mitt Romney in it at all, that will have just about Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski if you're looking for anyone to defect on things. That's basically the universe, and Donald Trump will know it.
And how are Democrats preparing for all of this, Mary Alice?
Well, obviously, there's some that are still holding out hope for the House, as sort of slim as that potential is. Look, I think that Democrats right now in Washington are thinking about how they can try to protect federal civil servants. It's something that's come up to me a lot in conversations here at the White House. Obviously, we saw Trump make threats about wanting to make sure that there's a purity test for civil servants and people that work at federal agencies here, and a big push on foreign policy. They're trying to figure out how to do everything they can to support Ukraine. They think that's one of the biggest, most immediate dividing lines between President Biden and President-elect Trump.
And as we heard today, Elon Musk apparently is part of the Ukraine policy operation at the emerging, incoming White House. Thank you very much, Rick, Mary Alice, Ramesh. We'll be back in just a moment. That's all for us today. Be sure to tune into This Week on Sunday morning here on ABC. I'll speak with Trump supporter Vivek Ramaswamy, and you can see more of my conversation with Charlamagne the God, that and much more. I'm Jonathan Karl, and until next week, that's This Week Live.